panelists as well for graciously being here with us tonight. We're excited to be here to try to shed some light on this concept of transferable skills for you. So thanks to you as well for giving up some of your evening to learn about this concept. And so this is primarily going to be a panelist and question and answer driven workshop, but to try to set the stage for this conversation, I'm going to say just a few words and then open it up to our panelists who will talk a little bit about their perspective on this issue and probably tell you a little bit more about who they are. So before we get started, there's a sign-in sheet that I'm going to start passing around if you guys can sign in so that we can follow up with you as we need to and send you out information. We're taping this session so we can send you a link to that and you can share it with all your friends and family and neighbors. So this concept of transferable skills is becoming increasingly important and gaining significant traction in the narrative of the importance of transferring skills into the workplace, especially for graduate students and students in general as they enter the workplace. So there's also an increasing narrative that suggests a lot of evidence-based narrative suggesting that the skills that students and graduate students are obtaining in academia and their academic careers isn't exactly matching the skills that employers are wanting from employees or prospective employees. So, and in fact, employers are actually wanting individuals to be very multifaceted, multidimensional, multi-skilled, so that the employer can maintain its relevance and profitability within the marketplace. So you're going to see probably a shift in the next several years, maybe decades, where industry and employers are really going to put more pressure on the academics to better align the skills that students are getting in academia with the skills that employers are actually wanting. So a lot of these skills fall under this umbrella term, transferable skills. So the objectives today really are trying to help you understand what transferable skills are important for your career. I hope that we'll discuss why it's important to be thinking about obtaining these skills in graduate school. And then lastly, I hope that we leave today with some insight in how you can try to obtain some of these skills while you're in graduate school. Because again, it's my belief that a lot of times our graduate programs aren't explicitly integrating these skills into your curricula, whatever academic degree that you're pursuing. So with that, just a real sort of high-level definition of what transferable skills are. These skills are skills and knowledge that really transcend any specific discipline, and they're those that can be transferred between different job sectors and job roles within a particular sector. So in general, some of these are such skills as communication, interpersonal skills, negotiation, networking skills, along with many others, and I'll list a slide in just a few minutes that lists several other of these skills. This contrasts greatly with the hard skills that you're sort of hardwired with in your academic programs. And these are the knowledge and skills that are particularly associated with your academic degree, so to speak. So an example would be if you're an accounting major, it would be your understanding of accounting and then how you apply that understanding to being an accountant out in the job market. So then what are the other transferable skills that employers are wanting? Well, it turns out if you Google search this topic, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of articles and blog posts that relate to this subject. And in fact, many different credible agencies have conducted surveys on this topic, and these surveys have surveyed employers that are top-ranked employers. Many times they're in Fortune 500 companies, specifically asking what skills they want their prospective employees or current employees to possess. And again, they match those that I listed in the previous slide, and they also include things like leader, follower, delegation type skills, time and project management skills, being technology and social media savvy, having ethics and integrity, being resilient, having critical and analytical thinking skills, being a keen problem solver, and they also range through what's known as business acumen skills, which is generally the basic understanding of business terminology and how businesses function. So with that very brief introduction, then we'll move into our panelists discussion. So I'll introduce them one by one, and then they'll discuss their perspective and tell you a little bit more about who they are. So we have Dr. Chris Ross, who's the Associate Director of Teaching and Technology here at UK's Center for the Advancement of Learning and Teaching. And we have Dr. Elisa Cohen, who's the Department Chair and Associate Professor of Communication. And she's also the Director of the Health Communication Research Collaborative. She's also the Editor of Communication Yearbook. We have Ms. Sally Foster, who's the Director of the Office of Career Management here at the UK Gatton College of Business and Economics. And we have Ms. Karen Hawkins, who's the owner and a consultant for Hawkins HR Consulting. So Chris, if you'll lead us out.
I felt a little awkward about being asked to go first because I see a few of you that I've worked with in the PFF program where I think I've rapidly gained the reputation of being Dr. Doom. So I'll, in keeping with that reputation, I'll say that if all you're doing is, working your teaching assistantship and preparing for life as a research professor in an R1 university, I'll couch my language by just saying you may want to rethink that career path, because all the evidence that we have says that that's statistically not a very likely future for you. Sorry, Morris, I just had to start with that. So it is true. It is true, and it's only getting worse. And the other unfortunate thing that I'm going to tell you is that very little about your graduate training actually prepares you for anything that you're going to do in the world outside of academia. So with those two incredibly optimistic viewpoints, I think I'll start with that. And I'll say this as someone, I did my PhD in political theory, and with an emphasis in Appalachian studies here at the University of Kentucky, possibly the least employable subfield and sub-subfield in my discipline. And that was okay for me because I knew from the very beginning that I just simply didn't want a tenured position, right, tenure track position. I mean, I looked at the numbers pretty early on. I knew that was a highly unlikely thing to do, and so I figured, well, I'd better learn how to do something that will keep me gainfully employed once I left. And and so my career path has followed a pretty odd thing. I was a singer-songwriter in a professional rock and roll band for a long time, which is a great way to teach you all sorts of the skills that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. I actually really benefited early in my graduate career from being pulled into work as an ethnographer on an adult education project, which was being part of what we would call today a distributed team, but back in this day and age, when I first did that, when the internet was still dial-up, and we didn't have all the tools that we had today, we wouldn't quite call it a distributed team, but it taught me a lot, and I went on from there to working as a research assistant at the Appalachian Center, which was a great way to learn multidisciplinary skills and some what we would call transferable skills. When this came out, I was research director of that center, then went on to work for an economic development nonprofit. I ended up doing social technology strategy for the university when social media started really hitting its crest. I did some work over in IT as part of the user experience group, taking my ethnographic skills and putting them into an applied framework. I work for a team now that's doing some basically, consulting essentially with faculty. And then there's the side businesses that I keep myself in. So I'm part of a distributed consulting firm that has partners in 3 different states, and we only physically see each other just a handful of times a year. and I keep my hand in that sort of consulting and then work as an independent consultant doing futuring myself. All of which is to say that, you know, I maybe am a little bit old to be part of the generation that you were part of, which is, you know, popularly referred to in the press as Generation Flux, right, which is the gig economy. You know, I started out my career as a jazz musician, so I was very comfortable with the idea that you just sort of work gig to gig to gig. You got a good reputation. As long as you did those things, you could maintain some gainful employment. So that's kind of the world that you go into, this world that you're going to do a lot of different things over the course of your career. The fortunate thing is that you can develop some really basic skills and some mindsets that are going to help you do that. I just want to talk to you about a few of these. The first one is I want to encourage you right now, before you even get close to the point of defending your dissertation, to think like a consultant, right? And we oftentimes give consultants a really bad rap. I know a lot of good consultants, hopefully I am one, right? But there's a mindset to that, which is to say you have to look for opportunities. One of the things that I think is really unfortunate about graduate education as it's conceived now is it's really good about teaching you to not look for opportunities. In fact, it trains you to look for fewer and fewer opportunities until you find a very small area of specialization where hopefully somebody will give you gainful employment for a lifetime to do that one really particular thing. Right? That's actually the exact opposite of how the world works today, which is why I think that, and other people, when they look at graduate training, think you're ill-served in this regard. So look for opportunities, and you always have to be thinking, like, what's your unique value proposition? Like, in everything that you do, when you look for opportunities, you have to be thinking, like, what is it specifically that I bring to the table? And that's why you have to get really good at marketing yourself, right? And thinking of yourself as a brand. Now this is going to sound really crass, and coming from a political theorist who studied, you know, Foucault in Frankfurt School, it's a little bit odd for me to come and tell you this, but it's true, right? You have to think about marketing yourself and building a brand. It doesn't mean glomming onto your mentor's brand, which a lot of us are taught to do. It doesn't mean glomming onto your institution's brand, because increasingly that won't be very valuable, right? Market yourself, right? Market yourself. And another rule from consulting is don't stay on the beach too long. Right? Grad school is actually a long exercise. I spent 8 years in graduate school. It was a long time to be on the beach if I hadn't done things outside of graduate school to prepare yourself. On the beach is a consulting term for not billing, right? Not being actively involved in projects. Right? So don't stay on the beach. Be involved in lots of different projects. And the final part of this that I would say is learn to love deliverables. Right? In consultant world, you live and die by deliverables. In graduate school, you might write some papers for a class. If you're lucky, you might recycle these into chapters for your dissertation, and you have one big deliverable at the end. You know, you have to get really good at communicating well with all different kinds of deliverables. Really short white papers, right? PowerPoint decks. And I don't mean like, you know, dull bullet point decks. You're going to have to get really good at that form of communication because that's the way the world sort of understands. Some of you have seen some of the Prism NSA PowerPoint decks that are just horrible, and some designers went in and redesigned these things so that they look good, right? So if you want to be effective in the world, get good at communicating that way. The second thing I would say is learn early on to think project. Now, your dissertation is actually a really big project that you're trained to think in that terms, but unfortunately it means that you're working on just one really big project that may or may not have a payoff at the end. So what I would say is live for the project. Seek out lots of different projects that you can get involved with through as many different areas of academic and non-academic life as you can. Just get really good at getting into a project, working with other people, and having something deliverable to put in your portfolio up at the end. Do that as often as you can. And if you can, get some project management skills. This does not mean learning how to do email effectively, which is what it seems to be for the most time for most faculty I come in contact with, because they often consider getting email done like a really amazing accomplishment. But in the world outside of academia, you have to get better at that. You can spend about $2,000 to go to Louisville and get what's called Project Management Professional Certification. Do this. Right? Do this. It's a small investment in your future, but I promise you, if you get your certified PMP, you will never go hungry a day in your life. It's a high in-demand skill set regardless of what you do, and it will help you be 10 times more effective in getting your dissertation done, especially if there's lab work or field work to be done to do it. Right? You can take that and get that experience doing project management by working as part of a larger lab, as part of a research group. And what I mean is like seek out research assistant opportunities. And I don't mean just being an RA for a faculty member who has you doing like bibliographic work for them and returning things to the library. Be a part of like one of our multidisciplinary centers on campus, seek out those opportunities, work as part of a group in that regard. It'll really pay off. My years in the Appalachian Center doing, research team work where we were in the field, building networks, having deliverables constantly was one of the best things that happened to me in the course of my graduate education. And it's the thing that, my coursework didn't necessarily help a whole lot, but it were the things that I've learned in my research assistantships that actually kept me fed for the last several decades. So please do that. Third thing I would say is learn to be a team player. Academics are really bad at this, right? We're not rewarded for co-authored papers, especially if we stray outside our discipline. Every reward structure you come in contact with says don't be a team player, which again is the opposite of the way the world works. Learn to coordinate with people, right? Learn to work well as part of a team. Build a network, right? Build this early. It doesn't mean other people in your discipline. In fact, your network is going to be better the more you network with people outside of your discipline. Use work media and get really good at this. What I mean by work media are Enterprise 2.0 tools, Google Docs and spreadsheets, Google+, Yammer, SharePoint, Google Shutter, right? Learn to use these things because being skilled and able to communicate with people at a distance, again, I'm part of a small business where we're not physically co-located. We've learned to use tools that work very effectively together, so do that, right? Fourth skill that I would say is public speaking and sales. And we're not real comfortable with most of those things. Most academics don't speak very well publicly. It's why we go and read papers at conferences. You will never read a paper at a professional gathering or business gathering outside of academia. It's the number one skill, I can tell you. Go, do Toastmasters, do something. I developed my skills being the lead singer of a band, playing for hundreds of drunken people in small, smoky clubs, yelling at you. Fortunately, there were no throwing of beer bottles against chicken wire, but it can happen. You do that, you do that night after night after night, it gets you comfortable in front of crowds, right? Get comfortable being in front of a crowd. Number two, get good at building a PowerPoint deck. Don't rely on bullet points. There are a lot of good things that can help you with this. There's a book called Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. Check it out at the library, read it. It's super helpful for telling the story. All right, presentations in, slideology. Learn how to build a really good deck and learn how to speak to it so that you're not using it as a crutch. If you develop that, no matter what you do in life, you're going to get good. And it doesn't mean just presenting some dull, dry research. It means telling a story. Right? If you can tell a story, if you can construct a coherent narrative and get up and do that in front of people, you're going to find work no matter what you do. Right? Fifth thing I would say is social media. Get good at it. Academics tend to think they're above social media. They're really not. Right? Or at least they shouldn't think of it. But I would say don't think of this in terms of Facebook. Just forget all about Facebook. It's over. It just doesn't know it's over yet. Right? In 2 years, it's going to be like AOL. We're going to laugh at it behind its back. Facebook is for granddads, right? It's not for people who get work done. You want to think about networks like LinkedIn and Twitter. LinkedIn seems terribly dull and bourgeois, but it will get you work. It will make you professional connections. Use it. Twitter, I can't tell you how important my professional development and career Twitter's been. I've been flown out to more conferences than I can name just because of meeting people that I'd never met face-to-face on Twitter. It's grown my career. It's grown my visibility in my profession. Use it, learn to use it well, do it today if you're not already. And then if you're really brave, consider niches like Tumblr, or Pinterest. I know a guy that just makes Pinterest boards of all the books he reads. He's a professor, but he does stuff outside the field. It makes him really well known for that. And then use it to build networks and be purposeful about it. Don't just post nice pictures of your cat or talk about your cat losing a hairball in the middle of the day. Whatever. Use it professionally. Use it purposefully. Connect with the right people. Build a network. And then finally, be a T-shaped person. One of the biggest damages that graduate school will do to you is to teach you to be an I-shaped person, or without the serifs, right? So you're a sans serif I person. You go incredibly deep, but it's incredibly narrow, right? And you don't connect well to other disciplines. You're penalized for doing so. But all the most important work that's being done out in society today is being done by firm, staff, with T-shaped people. What do we mean by that? It means people who are able to go really deep in a specific discipline, but also have enough hooks out into other fields where they can connect across with the T. And then the best people go through their life, and every so many years, they draw down, drill another T, and keep connecting, and they can connect to other people's Ts. If you want to see how this works, look at places like IDEO, or Stone Yamashita Partners, right? Keith Yamashita is the principal there, sypartners.com or IDEO.com, and look at who they hire. It's an incredibly multidisciplinary team. They take on all kinds of problems, and people who can be T-shaped are always in constant demand. So those would be the transferable skills that I would say you're going to need to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I appreciate a lot of Chris's comments. I'm going to be the glasses half full, perhaps, because I think that there are a lot of transferable skills that I learned in my PhD program. I'm bullish about the growth of the social sciences and the way that my discipline is sort of responding to some challenges in academia. And I think that, although I think that I'll share some common themes, I want to talk to you about navigating this kind of transition between the academic and the non-academic world. I received my PhD, I want to tell a little story about myself to give you a sense of my perspective, at the University of Southern California. And I chose my PhD program. It was an excellent PhD program for one, but also it was in Los Angeles. And so I figured if I didn't crack it in academia, or I didn't end up getting that tenure track job, I could just go into industry, right? I mean, millions of people move to LA or Los Angeles every year. But I grew up in Kentucky, and so I'm delighted to be back here. And when I first got my PhD in communication, I engaged in a lot of community-based research projects. However, much of my work was more in political communication, was a little more theoretical, less applied. My first job I took at St. Louis University, I was in a small liberal arts department and program, and I really missed being in that resource-rich environment, collaborative environment that I had in my PhD program. So I went across to the College of Public Health. I met some people at my first orientation. And I joined a research group with their new, at the time new, Center for Excellence in Cancer Communication Research. And soon, all the theories and interest in community-based research that I had thought about in graduate school knew had a kind of applied home in cancer communication research. I stayed at St. Louis University for 4 years before joining the faculty here. And similarly, I just sort of jumped right in. Sometimes you don't know exactly what taking a path like that will lead. That's my daughter. I have a 5-year-old girl that I've had along the way as well. And sometimes you just kind of need to think about what skills you have, what you want to do, what your contribution you want to make to society. And sometimes the answers to those questions aren't exactly what you thought they would be when you started your PhD program. And that's okay. So you kind of need to know how your professional identity grows along with your experience and time in graduate school. And what you have in graduate school that you might not have at any other point in your life, and you're not going to believe this when I say this, is time. You have time. You have time to think in the classroom, to work with students, to expand your research skills, to expand other skills. And you can do that a little bit along the way with your faculty member, but what was neat for me is that once I realized what I wanted to do, and all of my research is involved in creating new communication strategies to help reduce cancer disparities, then I connected with other places on campus, etc. But my connection isn't just academic; it's also beyond the academy into the community. And so I do a lot of community-based research. I do some consulting, and I'm not alone in my group of PhD program, kind of my cohort of students who decided to go both in academia and now in administration. But my best friend in graduate school who sort of helped me think through this little presentation for you all, she is CEO of a company called Play Science. And she took a traditional path, wound up at Indiana University, but soon became disillusioned with academia. She wanted to work in the children's television industry. and she got a job as a research director for this little company known as Nickelodeon. And so she moved to New York and became a research director before starting her own company. And I like to think that there's no real difference in her skill set or my skill set or where we could have gone, because not everyone will be an academic who earns a PhD, and not everyone is going to be an academic who ends up in academia. There's just a variety of life forces, competing financial forces at work. So we all have to think a little bit about this. So for me, my background in communication, there's a lot of link between academic and industry studies, and that's very common, so it's perhaps more natural. But if you think more broadly, all of us have some portable knowledge that might move beyond the academy. And so that knowledge is content specific, is discipline specific. But then there's portable skills as well. And so I think what you want to do is be deep in both areas. You both need to have a breadth of knowledge that might be portable. For me, that portable knowledge of my discipline is that I can train and coach people in public speaking and presentation skills, etc. But I also have a bunch of specific knowledge about health communication and health behavior. But then there's other sorts of portable skills that we have, the ability to manage projects among them that were previously discussed. I want to talk a little bit about them. So research skills, you might not give yourself enough credit in terms of the way that businesses, companies need research, need people who understand audiences, and a lot of your skill set, whether it's, especially if you're a social scientist, will apply, whether it's understanding audiences or being able to conduct surveys or ethnographies, etc. Interpersonal communication and negotiation skills will get you your first job, will get you your first raise. You just have to gain those skills, and that means you have to try them out. You're learning how to relate, how to pick members of a committee and bring people together in a group for your dissertation. Those skills will become important in other contexts when you are a faculty member for bringing people together, or outside of academia when you're trying to bring a team together, particularly if you're from multiple companies focused on a project or an outcome. You need digital media skills, also communication and dissemination skills, so not just being able to talk to internal audiences, but also to translate what you do to a broader audience, and business and management skills. Those are good, but they're not as good as portable know-how. And you need to think about these types of skills that you have, such as public speaking, instructional development skills, teaching and learning skills. You all should know something about assessment and evaluation from being a university teacher. Also, the idea of commercialization and knowledge transfer, how to get specific products into people's hands, whether you're in biology or whether you're in chemistry or whether you're in engineering. You should learn from people on campus that have these sets of experience, if these areas interest you. Professors aren't just people that teach and that do particular research. There's a variety of faculty with interests that are sort of beyond the classroom or academia. And as you think about that, you can talk to them and seek connections. You also need to think about breaks in the conversations. There is a conversation that's going. It's both disciplinary and outside of your discipline, and you need to join it. And so what that means is if you're doing science that's portable into industry, you need to go to industry conferences. You can offer to volunteer. They'd be delighted to have you. They think they're doing something for students, and you might learn something and gain important connections that could be valuable for dissertation research or elsewhere. There are industry magazines and blogs. They don't care that you're don't have a PhD in hand yet often. There's often topic area summits, etc. But join the conversation. There's a broader conversation going on outside of academia about things that you're studying, and that's an opportunity for you to get career connections. You need to know the language. Right now you're getting some bad habits, academese, as I would call it. And you might think, well, if I can go into this consulting firm like McKinsey or someplace else, they should love to hire me. I have all these great research skills. Well, you need to be able to kind of translate what you're saying into their jargon. You need to understand their issues. That, for a social scientist, it might take us years to accomplish a study. In industry, they might satisfy us by collecting data and putting something together that would take you years in a couple of weeks. And that's okay for them because they need to move to stay on top of what they need. You need to learn to be succinct. All of you are used to writing long dissertations and papers. That is not going to fly outside of academia. And if you learn to be succinct and present your ideas where you're making the best arguments first when you're talking with people, that will help you in your dissertation writing and other writing within academia, but it will also allow you to port those skills outside academia. You need to show for respect for people who don't have PhDs and who are working outside, who are very smart and who have lots of data and they make decisions on that are data that they make actions on and commercial decisions on every day. They know a lot of things, and just because you end up with a PhD, that doesn't mean they necessarily are going to follow your opinion. It doesn't give you authority in their specific context. You need to consider their constraints. While you've been taking time and thinking and doing a lot of things, the industry moves forward, and so you need to understand that along with timelines. When you're making presentations, you need to get away from the bullet points and be very visual and tell stories. In industry, if you talk about, if you've ever seen like the Ignite presentations and other types of presentations to convey ideas, you need to learn to kind of market in that venue if you're going to end up in a consulting context or in a context that's really connecting people with data. You need to be constructive. When you're working and meeting with people, you need to think about every opportunity is to, sure, give them some knowledge of yourself and to introduce a relationship, but also to leave kind of a positive impression. You never know when that impression will be worthwhile later. You need to navigate your brand. It matters. This follows what Chris says, so I'm not going to belabor it. But you need to create contrast. How are you different from other people? How are you the same from people in your field? There are 100 people in your discipline that are getting a PhD this year. Why is yours better? Yours is from the University of Kentucky. What does that mean? How are you going to kind of market yourself? You need to think about the reach and effectiveness of your work, whether or not it's relevant, how it creates impact. And if you don't know the answers to these questions, then you might want to think about jobs outside of academia where the standards for showing that you are, number one, your work has the greatest reach, that might be a bit lower, might be more based on the community and the local knowledge that you have to share. Partnerships. This is so important, and if you can learn this in graduate school, it will benefit your research, but it will benefit your career outside of academia if you so choose. You need to find partners. You need to develop formal partnerships. So if you have a research professor that's working with a community locally or a set of industries or businesses, nonprofits, etc., you need to develop partnerships that can help you. Those partnerships you can volunteer, you can work over the summer, can help you collect your data. You can conduct ad hoc research for outside companies or other sorts of nonprofits in order to get experience. You can develop informal partnership relationships where you volunteer, partnerships even internally on campus, like, I don't know if you're interested in social services, like with the PMP Center, etc. You can develop your own. You can create intermediary partnerships where you find someone who's graduated from your program or somewhere else that helps you connect to another person. And in general, in closing, I would just say that I really think that we need to educate for both theory and practice. We know that not all PhDs will end up in the academia, in the academy, and that's just fine. But we need, in order to kind of make the next step connection to help you navigate out of academia and into kind of a broader kind of public setting, we need to allow for opportunities for toe dipping. So I recommend all of you who are interested to make sure to get your toes wet before you leave. Figure out what partnerships are appropriate for you, what portable skills that you have, what you need to know. And if you take with that also a sense of community and giving back. In academia, we like to give back. We often are engaged or service-oriented as part of our DOE, etc. But if you take that with you into the community, and that's why you're moving into a community setting versus an academic setting or an industry setting, I think that would be wise and do you well, and you'll be well received regardless of your initial intentions in getting a PhD.
my mic on? Yep, okay. I too am going to stand just because I'm more comfortable speaking standing up, so. Okay. Again, I'm Sally Foster, and I'm the director of the Graham Office of Career Management over at the Gavin College of Business and Economics. I have worked here at UK for about 7 years. I started with the College of Business doing just MBA career services, and then we, within the last 2 years, have developed our own internal resource to provide career services within the College of Business. So my team, we work with all undergrads as well as our MBAs and Masters of Accounting students within the College of Business. And what I wanted to share with you is a little bit about my own story, much as our other panelists have done. Then as a career counselor, share with you my perspective on sitting down with people on a daily basis to talk with them about their skills, and then just share some advice. And I think you'll find some common themes that are emerging on what we're all speaking to tonight. But I went to undergrad at a liberal arts college in the middle of the cornfield in Indiana and earned my bachelor's degree in psychology and decided I wanted to pick up a minor in human resources because I thought I needed something a little more practical in case I decided not to go right on to grad school. So that was my combination, psychology and human resources, and then I did proceed to go right on into my graduate work and did my focus in counseling. And at the time, I thought my destination was going to be mental health counseling, and that I was going to be in the deep, dark gutter doing crisis counseling work for my career. And once I began my graduate work, it wasn't until I ended up in my career counseling course within my counseling curriculum, and I took a career assessment, that I learned that I really had what it took to be a career counselor, and that idea had never really occurred to me. I don't even know that I was cognizant of what that role actually entailed. But I learned at that point in time, it was one of the strongest recommendations on this assessment I took, and I had this new passion and idea for a new direction, which was a little bit anxiety-producing to kind of change plans midstream, but I was still in the right program in order to prepare me for that. And so what I did from there was very intentionally plan my practicums, my community involvement, my research projects to help prepare me and get the skills I needed, of course, to focus on making a successful transition into that area. And when I look back now, I've been in higher ed career services for 14 years now, and when I look back at the path I took, it's perfect. It's a great combination with the psych, the counseling, the human resources, but at the time in the middle of it, none of it made sense. I didn't know how it was all going to fit together. And so I learned a very important lesson, and that was to trust what you're passionate about, to trust those instincts. We tend to doubt them, and sometimes we need data with assessments to back them up, or others to give us feedback about where our strengths are. But that's the one important lesson I've learned was to follow. There's a reason we like the things we like, and we can plan accordingly based around some of those interests. So I knew what I knew at the time, and I made the most of it. And I truly do continue to love my job, and every day I sit down with job candidates, again, undergraduate, graduate, we work with alumni, and help them think about how to fit the pieces of their life puzzle together when it comes to their career progression. And we think about all kinds of important questions. With undergrads, it's what kind of major should I have? What graduate degree should I earn? What job titles should I really be looking for? And am I aware of even the job titles that would be a good match for me? Can I really do this idea that I have? It seems very grandiose right now. Or for some of our career changers who are changing career paths after completing some other careers, it can be very risky and scary. So these are all questions that come up, and part of the process of assessing your fit with your future career is going through an assessment process. And we use an analogy for this that will help me get to the skills focus here in just a moment. But when we're trying to consider what would make a good career fit, a good satisfying choice, we use the analogy of a table. And so we sit at tables every day. The tabletop in this analogy is your career choice. Okay, so that's our tabletop, and that tabletop will change throughout our life. We will merge into different career areas. It's very typical. But each time we're considering changing that tabletop, we want to examine those table legs that support that tabletop. And with the assessment process, we look at those 4 legs being your values, your interests, your personality, and then the skills. And so with your values, when we're considering a good fit, we're wanting to understand what's most important to you. Is it being an independent contributor or working on a team? Is it liking a lot of structure and organization or working under pressure in a fast-paced environment? There are all different kinds of values we bring to what we look for in a satisfying career. Obviously, interests. If we're not motivated and excited about our work, we burn out rather quickly. That's another important area. Personality, just like we have our own personality characteristics, so do professions in a generic way. They tend to draw similar personality styles, so examining that fit. And then to our topic this evening, of course, skills. What skills do we have currently that we feel are our strengths that we can plug in? But also considering what that tabletop is, what skills do we need to intentionally develop so that we can make a successful transition? And so that's part of what my work as a career counselor is to help people identify their goals and help them get there. And skills is a very important part of that. And I think there's a difference between the skills that we are good at and can do versus another layer of that, or which skills do we enjoy using most. And sometimes there's a difference there, and that's a good thing to flush out and understand as well. You referred to the surveys at the beginning of all the studies of what attributes employers are most interested in when it comes to applicants, and I'm very familiar with those surveys, and it's also fun in my position to be able to talk to employers on a daily basis to hear directly from them what they look for in the hiring process. And our office has a great opportunity to learn from employers. Some of the employers that we get the opportunity to work with, of course, are the Big 4 accounting firms. So we have very regular interaction with PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, and EY. We've had very successful history in helping students get placed with some of the global businesses here in the area like Tempur-Pedic and Alltech, and Big Ass Fans. And then with Procter & Gamble and Humana and Toyota being others that we really seek information from and learn from in this process. And some of the things that we continually hear, which again will be a bit repetitive, but some of the things that we hear from our employer partners that they seek most in candidates is beyond, again, just the technical that you're learning in your curriculum, but it's these process-focused skills that are the soft skills. And some of them involve creative problem solvers or entrepreneurial thinking, where you're able to think outside the box and anticipate problems way ahead of time so that you can take the initiative to solve them and work independently to do that. So that's a bit more of what we hear them talking about when it comes to entrepreneurial within a business itself. Having transparent communication where you can deal with personnel problems, with customer complaints in an authentic and genuine way, and be able to have that high emotional IQ or EQ when it comes to dealing with people. We've all talked about teamwork so far, but the cross-functionality of teamwork and valuing diversity in thought and perspective, because it only improves the final product. That is something we hear from employers quite often. Being flexible and adaptable. Companies like Alltech and Big Ass Fans that are here in the area are moving in all different kinds of directions and expanding their lines of business, and they look for employees that are able to move and adapt quickly and not be so focused on the way things have been done, but be able to move at a fast pace. So those are some of the skills, again, that we kind of hear that are sought after among our own candidates at Gatton. But I think, again, in finding ways to acquire these, again, you do have to go outside of just the basic lectures and study and really capitalizing on the processes that are in place with team projects and your research to really develop those by paying attention to your team building skills when you're working on teams and really taking advantage of those opportunities in connection with your curriculum is important. So let me share a little more advice then based on my story and my day-to-day work. I would say again, trust your gut. So do what you like, find what you like, and try to clarify that career goal as soon as you can, because that helps you make better informed decisions. So you can be very strategic in how you spend your time in and out of the classroom. You want to diversify your involvement and yet weave a theme through that. So we've talked about different ways with professional associations here on a regional scale, on a national scale, with community and civic involvement, university organizations, with research projects and the practicums or placements you choose throughout your grad work. Trying to, of course, be very intentional about that and having those transferable skills and the theme emerge from your experience that communicates that story when it comes to sharing that on your resume. I also recommend keeping track of everything that you do, because we all, often are trying to condense all our information to a one-page resume because we hear that's what employers are most interested in. However, as you're updating your vita or your resume, I want to encourage you to keep a version that has everything on it that you are doing and have done, and use really nice, full, descriptive details about those, so that each and every time you apply for a position in the future, you want to customize your materials, but you can pick the specific material that's very relevant to that particular job and put it on that version of your resume. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make in communicating their skills is it being too vague and not having a lot of really concrete examples. And so some of you may have used the CAR model when you're working on developing your vita or resume. Is anyone familiar with that? Just a quick review, there are certain kinds of information that employers are most interested in when communicating your skills on a resume. And again, keeping track of all this will help you be much more efficient when it comes time to applying to positions. But the C stands for context. So for each of your experiences, whether it's academic projects, jobs, whatever it is that you're describing, you want to build the context so that whoever's reading your materials will understand what the focus of the business or the project was. We tend to get right into the action statements, but if we don't understand the context, the rest of that information doesn't make as much sense. So what's the mission or goal of that organization or project? The A stands for the action points, and that's where those skills, communicating those skills comes in. And I really like the idea that you were sharing about translating, because we really do have to work to translate into the language of where we're headed next and focus on those transferable skills from what we've done. We might have to translate that sometimes, and that's very important. And then R stands for results, those positive outcomes. So making sure you're hitting all three of those types of information when you're sharing your background and skills. The results show the deliverables. So maybe it's ways you helped improve a project or initiative for the employer, where if you can share numbers and percentages and that kind of thing, that's always great, but qualitative outcomes are good too. And sometimes it helps to ask yourself, what was the purpose of that activity as you communicate the outcomes, or how did I even grow and acquire a new skill? And so those are some very practical ways to think about how to communicate your skill set. And I also would just encourage you to be very intentional in the activities you choose so you can keep building that resume that will help wherever you land next. So those are my main points for tonight, and then I'll look forward to participating in the questions later. But good evening. Everybody excited about this? Huh? Okay, good. Well, I'm Karen Hawkins. I own a consulting firm, and you're looking at all the employees right here. It's just me by myself, a solopreneur. I heard that term the other day, which is probably been around, but I hadn't heard it. Just again, give a little bit of my background. I went to Bellarmine University and graduated with an economics bachelor's degree. I started out as an accounting major, and I didn't like my professor my first year. I moved into business administration, and then changed again into economics with a business administration minor. So we had a human resources major at the time, and I didn't know what it was and wasn't really interested in it. The way I ended up in HR, I think, is very much of what you said. You land in certain places, and then you just follow your path of passion and what you're good at. So I interviewed for a position, just an administrative position, to get my foot in the door in a manufacturing facility, and I did not get the position. It was with the engineering department, and 3 months later I got a call back from the HR manager, and she said, "I've kept your resume this whole time and I have an opening and I want you." So I'm like, okay, good, sounds good. So that's how I ended up in HR. 20 years later, still enjoying it. It's, there in human resources, there are headaches and there are thrills, and, pretty much, I guess, with any job. But I think I found the path was placed there in front of me, and I just kind of run with it. It's been a good mix. I like business and numbers, and I like to help people, and I feel like I'm pretty good with employee relations, too. So I've been a consultant. I had a business several years ago for about 5 years. One of my clients hired me, and I just left them about 3 years ago. I was with them for 10 years, still working with them. So I've been back into business by myself for the last 3 years. So I am an active recruiter. I have had interviews today. I've reviewed resumes today. I've been an HR manager in manufacturing most of the time. Most of it's been in automotive supply. I have a wide variety of clients, from critter control to world-class auto glass manufacturers. I have a railroad business I work with. It's all over the place. So people are people are people. I do believe that. I've recruited scientists for a very new facility here in Lexington. So, when I'm recruiting, what I talk about is what I'm looking for, both on resume, just these are general, and then also when I'm speaking with someone on the phone or in person. Whenever you put that resume out there, whether it's, sending it directly to a business or wherever you like to work, or if you're just posting it on Monster or your LinkedIn profile, which I highly recommend doing, that's where you're selling yourself. I know you know that, but I think one thing that I have found when I've been interviewing some people is that they aren't succinct enough. I think things need to be, very clear to the person who's reading your profile or your resume quickly. Because whenever I go through resumes, I might have 150 or 50 I'm going through very quickly. So your format needs to be very clear. Education, to me, needs to be at the top, and most certainly for those of you who are taking your time and money to get these degrees. That needs to be at the top. I know some people put it at the bottom. I don't know what you recommend, but that's what I recommend. So those are things that I look for, especially people who are barely new graduates. Another thing that's very important is co-ops. If you can do that, highly recommended. I know that you're busy with school, but it can be worked in usually. So those are very important. Oftentimes I can get a new graduate into a position where they would like to have somebody with 1 or 2 years experience if they've had a co-op for 2 or 3. So I'd recommend that. So as far as the resume goes, you have great career coaching that's here at the university. That's part of the tuition that you pay for. It's free. So I would highly recommend going in, talking to them about your resume, and then interviewing skills. I also do career coaching. I'm certainly not trying to sell myself. I think you've got what you need here,
but mock interviewing is so important. One of my clients I have right now is trying to get into dental school at U of L, and he talked with them about a year ago and didn't get in. His dad's a dentist. I mean, to me, it should be just, you know, he should get right in. I think there's something about the way he's presenting himself whenever he's going in. Eye contact is a biggie for him. You know, anyways, I can go on and on about that kind of stuff. But, so I want to talk about a few things of how I feel like you can get some skills, and then we'll open up to some questions. One thing that we've been talking about is things that you need to do. But I think that one thing we need to start with is, how do I know what I need? How do I know what I need? Maybe you are good with problem solving, but you're terrible when you're presenting something, or, you know, whatever. So a couple of things I would suggest. There are assessments out there. I use one called a DISC. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that one, but there is a lengthy DISC assessment you can take. It's DISC. And talking about your motivators, your drivers, you know, when you're 22, 25, 30, 35, you know, we don't necessarily know what really is it that's driving us to do things. We don't know we know what we think we know, what we like, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the direction we've gone in. So I would suggest some type of personality test, something that you can take that says this is a good fit for you, or this is where you need to work on things. The DISC specifically that I use will say, this is how you act when you get frustrated. This is how you want to be communicated to. This is do's and don'ts as far as you communicating to others. So I think it's really good. I use that when I'm coaching people. Also, another thing that I think is important is listening to your family members and your friends. If you're married, if you have a girlfriend, boyfriend, what do they tell you that you do that's annoying or isn't, or whenever you're in an argument with them or you're not getting along, what are the things that they say? You always shut down whenever we start talking. Or, why do you keep rambling on and on and on? You're driving me crazy. My husband does that. These are things that, you know, you're probably going to be doing that at work too. And whenever you're, you know, working with other people, these are some things that can help you or hurt you, I think. So, anyways, that's just a freebie that you can start today on your way home. Think about, what do people say to you? It's kind of like your own performance evaluation. It's just your real life one instead of your work life, right? Personal life. We talked a little bit, I heard a little bit about mentors. I believe in those. You know, there are companies that have those programs. You may not end up working with one, but find who you feel has your best interests at heart and take you under their wing. I was very lucky in that first job, first professional position. The HR manager would sit and talk to me for an hour or two just about things I need to do, you know, better or whatever. So if you can find that mentor, somebody who really does care and want to help you, even it might even be somebody you don't work with, but I would highly suggest that. My oldest son is in college. He attends Western, and he is a freshman this year and a pledge for a fraternity. And I'm finding it interesting now because he is not really an introvert, but definitely the type, if you want to go and do something, you've got to ask him first, and then he's right there. He's not necessarily that one that says, hey, you're ready, let's go. Now, in the job that he has in his fraternity now, he's the social chair, which is hilarious, but he's doing a good job. So those are things, you know, and I know you may not be wanting to go the sorority fraternity direction, but clubs, different things that you can do to show some leadership, see if you like it. He worked as a lifeguard and was promoted to assistant manager this last summer and absolutely hated managing people. So we had a really good discussion about that. I said, it just might not be what you want to do. That's okay if you don't want to manage people. But anyways, I think, all the opportunities, if we're talking about volunteer or work or whatever you can do now to start developing and learning what to do, what not to do. You're not going to necessarily start a job and know all these things. You're just not. Really, these skills should start in elementary school. That's the way I feel. Getting along with others, how to work in a little team. There are a lot of things. So hopefully, I believe over the years that will become more and more. My other son's in middle school, and they definitely try to incorporate that. Let me see what else. I think talking about setting yourself apart is most important. The job market right now is absolutely saturated, and we're talking about people with master's degrees, PhDs. These are positions that do not require that whatsoever, and I'm getting quite a few, at least in a master's degree level. So the degree is important. It's an absolute, really, but how you present yourself and how you, on paper and both, and also in person are so important. Expressing yourself whenever you're in an interview, whether this is on the phone or if you're in person with someone, there's that fine line of being confident and being cocky or too arrogant. So try to find that fine line. Smile when you're in there. People want to see some personality in there. They really, really do. Ask questions, but not too many. Body language, so important. That's where your career counseling here really helps. And, I think a lot of people probably think, well, gosh, just a few questions, just sit down, it's a conversation, what's the big deal? It is a big deal. If I interview two people who both have the same degree and done basically the same thing throughout their, college life, then very much of the time you're going to go with the person who you connect with most and you have that chemistry with. So just remember that. So I guess, I could go on and on, but I think we probably need to open up for some questions, and I'm happy to help answer some of those too. So I'll have a seat.
Okay, thanks all the panelists for all that background and information. So if you have any questions or comments or discussions, then feel free to bring them on.
So when you recommend people to diversify, how broad should that be? So I'm an engineer, should I go take a class in chemistry or should I learn a foreign language? That's basically how I'm trying to gauge it.
So what I say when I hear you ask that question, I still hear you framing it in terms of what can I do in an academic discipline, right? So you're still thinking in terms of like a student, right? As opposed to, okay, what else do I need to do? Well, maybe I should be an engineer who has project management certification skills, right? Which is a really great thing to have as an engineer. Or maybe I need to go do some work in public speaking, right? An engineer who can get on stage and really express themselves well, incredibly valuable, right? Or someone who's really good at coordinating a team using work media, right? This sort of thing. That's what I would encourage you to think about. When you think about diversifying, don't think in terms of discipline, but think about how you can take that deep expertise and then branch out from T-think, how you acquire skills that link you into other people.
I would add that not enough graduate students do externships, shadow professionals, informational interviews. You need to be the person you see that you want to be. You need to figure out how you're going to get there. And you can't do it by just focusing on what's going on here at EK or in the classroom. You have to connect outward in order to move outward. And I think that's the biggest mistake I see graduate students making is that I have my undergraduate students get tons of internships and figure it out and make connections. My graduate students Some of them do a lot of work in connection outside of the classroom, realize that as much as what they do outside the classroom is educational and will further their career as they do inside of it, because they're pushing their knowledge out. And then when they just keep it in the classroom and they think that's enough, that satisfies things, and they'll be okay, maybe. But everyone else that did that and all these other things are going to be the ones that are going to be more employable, period. I mean, and again, it's just like, it's true in academia too, right? The person that's published more, worked on more projects, have better letter writers, have better connections, went to more conferences. The same principle. It's deepening the network.
I would just add something else as well. I think it's hard because there are so many opportunities vying for your time, and again, having a more specific goal in mind of where you want to end up in the next few years will help you better filter how to spend that time, and looking at some example job postings that would be the kind of thing you're looking for will help you see what skill sets you need to have, and that will help you choose those opportunities if you need to enhance those or gain more experience. And I'd add, again, I'm a broken record, but where those interests are, it's amazing how you can combine job function and industry in order to combine those interests. So if you're not excited about public speaking, you hate it, yes, it's a good thing to get the basics down, but you're probably not going to be going after those opportunities if that's not something you're passionate about. Find something that you're passionate about and how it can combine with your discipline. It's quite endless and exciting to think about that in the future. You just don't know how that's going to work out yet.
Other questions?
I have a question. Dr. Ash, you mentioned the title of something to read that could improve PowerPoint decks and tell us. Could you?
Yeah, so I have to recommend, 3 things. So one, there's a nice little book by Carmen Gallo called Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. Steve, it's like, when I was a musician, one of the things that you spent a lot of time doing was listening to other musicians. And so if you want to get really good at public speaking, you pay attention to other people who are really good at doing that. And I think Gallo's book does a really good job of sort of breaking down the technique that made Jobs' keynotes in public speaking so effortless. So that's one thing. The second thing I would recommend is if you're just getting started in making PowerPoints that don't bullet point people to death, you want to read a thing called Presentation Zen. It's by a communication professor named Gar Reynolds at Osaka University. It's really great to design, give you some basic skills. Spend about an hour with that book and you'll be making some really basic, pretty PowerPoints. And then if you really want to nerd out, there's a book called Slideology by Nancy Duarte. Nancy Duarte was the person who made that really awesome deck for Al Gore that won the Oscar that year for An Inconvenient Truth. And that's if you want to go a little bit deeper. But if you have those 3 things on your shelf, you're in good shape.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Where would somebody begin that doesn't have a natural complement in the industry world?
So what do you mean? What field are you in?
Spanish literature.
What do you want to do? Do you know?
I know. But
Nothing wrong with that. I'm just asking.
I actually think that, it depends on, the literature part is, I think the interest in kind of writing, reading, history, libraries, information, kind of study areas. But then I would say the complement also is just, have you done any work with any of the, just thinking of nonprofits that are kind of centered on working to send people abroad, international relations, that sort of, or even just, I go with kind of working in the Latino community, even in Lexington and in other areas. They might not care about your Spanish literature degree, but your interest in culture and language is where I kind of try to make connections, if you're thinking about travel. And then also make sure to spend some time abroad if you can, or, potentially grabbing a teaching English abroad job even, that sort of stuff, and see where that might lead. It might be that you end up somewhere in the middle of teaching students and being a cultural translator sort of.
What I generally tend to say, I mean, I'm a political theorist, right? I mean, there's no industry in political theory, right? So one of the things I would say is really think at the core about what it is that you do, right? And that may not align with the surface area of the discipline, right? I mean, there's no industry call for the academic discipline of Spanish literature, right? But what do you do? Well, you understand context well. You can translate critical concepts from one language and the other so that communication is improved. I mean, if you boil down what you do, you can get down to some really simple things. And a way to do that is like the old 5 whys game. Like, why do I do that? Well, I do it because of this. Well, why is that the case? Well, I do it because of this. If you drill down, eventually you're going to get to that core of what it is that you do and what you're really passionate about doing. And then there's a whole world around that. I mean, books are translated into other languages all the time. I knew a young woman who did manga translation, right? And part of her job was to take that Japanese to English translation and punch that up to something that sounded better in English, that was beyond basic translation because you really understand the cultural effects. So, there's actually probably a lot that you could do out there. There may not be a job, but there's always work to do in that area. And so, one of the things, and I go back and forth with this with like career folks, is that I've stopped telling students, even grad students, to think about getting a job. It's just kind of one of those things that's an artifact of the 20th century, and that few people will have them and not many will. So think about how you can get work and get paid gainfully doing things that you know how to do at that basic level.
I know there's a Japanese American Society. I know you're in the Spanish realm, but recently I was recruiting for a Japanese speaking person who could also speak English, supply chain, customer service person. And that's a little tough. I advertised it on that website and had somebody in a week. So I don't know if there's something down that direction, with the Spanish or Latino area where they post positions somewhere. There's surely something in Lexington for this area. You can see what jobs are out there. And
Jobs related to kind of the culture industries are probably rare.
And there are certain professional associations related to that specific focus. Those are great resources for jobs as well as networking. And there's also some very practical tools here on campus that look at different majors and disciplines and show you all paths that are typical that you can take, and doing some assessment might help, again, kind of cross-reference that interest with different industries or areas. So, I'm happy to talk to you after to talk about how you plug into those. But it's a very, very common question. Most grad students come in expecting they should have it all figured out and have a direct plan. And many do not, and often those who do will change their course in midstream because of what they're exposed to throughout the process. So you're not by yourself.
I'll just add, there were several stories in mass media last week about the most in-demand job skill right now is actually in translation. And a lot of people would think it's in coding because, the tech industry is booming and it's going to continue to boom, and that's a good skill to have as well. But translation was actually currently the most in-demand job skill and projected to be so in the near future. And, you can use that in all different types of job sectors. So I think it's going to be a great skill to have.
It's kind of been mentioned that it's very likely that we won't have jobs or careers within our focus area. And many of us, graduate school, we're spending a lot of time in a very, very, very specific area of research or learning. How can we take this 2 to 5 to 7 years of specialized education and keep that relevant and attractive to a large variety of employers that may not be that exact area of focus?
I think it really depends on what you're doing. In health communication, this is the area I train my students on. There's just been incredible growth, both in industry with the Affordable Care Act and more people needing, improved communication skills at the point of care, aging population, et cetera, as well as in academia. So I do think there are different bright spots in academia. And so I don't think we can throw the baby out with the bathwater. At the same time, I think that the idea that you will only focus on translating Latin text in this one specific area for a lifetime, it's probably even, people that are specialists in philosophy with an academic job, over the course of a lifetime, most people have a couple different careers and paths. And so it's trying to figure out what's a little hop, but not a leap, is the way I like to say it. So for me, it was a little hop to move into a cancer context, a little maybe kind of a leap to move over into develop different types of mediated interventions. But it would have been, a leap for me to start to become, and not something I'm extremely passionate about. There are other people who are very passionate about this, about doing what one area of our field is instructional communication research, and how people can be better in a classroom setting and enhance student retention and that sort of stuff. There are communication aspects of that, they don't interest me. So I think that you need to think about what interests you and what might be a few little hops around that you could get meaningful experiences with, either with related research projects, just for the experience of having this diversity. And I knew this, I think maybe a little easier in the social sciences and experience area, maybe less if you're here, but still, it sounds like you knew this even when you were in graduate school, though. I knew that I didn't want to stay I wasn't willing to move anywhere in the country. I had specific areas and regions and that would constrain me, but so I knew I had to be a little bit more nimble in the types of both academic jobs or even non-academic jobs I might be interested in. And so I think that you just have to ask yourself what you're willing to sacrifice to get there and how much of your specialty you're willing to kind of, give up, I guess, to extend out. Because I think that when you're writing your dissertation, it has to be focused and finishable, and dissertation writing is its own process, and there's a lot of value in that depth. However, while you're engaging in the process, you just need to come up for air once in a while and realize there's a world going on out there, and that's the job market, period. And so it's balancing that, I think.
It's a mental shift more than anything, because there's a real sense of grieving and loss that you're going to go through. Right? It really is. You're investing a hell of a lot of time and money to know something that not long, the decay rate for the employability of a PhD who doesn't get a tenure track position, after the third year of being on the market, your disciplinary skills are considered to have eroded to the point where, they want fresh meat. And the reality is that there are hundreds of applicants for every position. Nobody's going to mourn that loss more than you, right? So at a certain point, you have to give up this sense of identity that it's like what you know. See, this poor guy behind you is like this. Dr. Rice is Dr. Doom. That's what they call me, and it's true. But you've got to divorce what you know from who you are and what you do. In grad school, all that stuff is in this really complex emotional soup, right? Who we are is what we know, is what we do. And then you're going to go out in the world, and if you're not fortunate enough to get a tenure track position, then you're going to have to divorce that idea that, yeah, I know this stuff. I did a PhD. I don't regret doing my PhD. Not at all. It helped me work through a lot of issues. I was able to explore things that I was interested in. Met a lot of great people. I don't regret for a moment the years and the money that was spent doing that. Not at all. However, at some point, I had to come to terms with the fact that I was not going to be a tenure track professor in political theory. And unfortunately, I'd known that right early on, so I was prepared at the right moment to divorce myself from that. So it's an identity. It's like this interior dialogue that you've got to learn to separate from and just come to terms with it. I mean, if you're doing your PhD only because you want a job doing it as an R1 professor, you got bigger issues, right? Bail now. Right,
Or
bail
don't
now.
fail, to be really excellent, to be able to distinguish yourself, because
But odds are, I'll completely go against it. So in political science, like 80-something% of hires nationally come out of 3 schools. What are you going to do? If you're getting a PhD in political science at UK, why? And I'll say why. It's my department. I'm allowed to say it. They get mad at me for saying it, but I'm not going to bullshit you. I'm not. Right? Statistically, you can really do it. But I know a kid that was my TA, got solo published in one of the top 3 journals of the field. He's a professor in Kazakhstan because nobody domestically would hire him. Why? Because he was from the University of Kentucky. He's got to figure out a different path. I'm not here to blow sunshine up any nether regions or paint a rosy picture. You can work really hard to distinguish yourself, and in the end, more than likely, it's not going to make a difference. Not for every discipline. We have some disciplines where you actually have pretty decent odds of doing it. Just do the research and know what you're going to do.
I think that's it. I think you have to know going in what your chances are, and it varies a lot by discipline and what you want to do.
You can edit that profanity out.
But, I mean, in my area, our success rate is much higher than that, but it's extremely higher than that. I have a couple students with job interviews this week, so it's great. But I just know that, but at the same time, I think that, but I think you have to be realistic with yourself in going for it. Just set yourself up well, be the job that you want to have. I mean, figure out what that skill set is. Do the work in advance. Give yourself options. In advance. Allow yourself to put your toes into industry or community organizations or other things. Don't give up on that just because you're in PhD school and you're just supposed to be focused. Yes, your faculty want you to focus, but they want you to be successful in all areas that would interest you. And you have more time now often than you will at any other time during your life.
So unfortunately, we have another group that's coming in at 6:30, so we're going to have to wrap it up. I'm sure the panelists would love to talk to you more, and I'm sure they'd love for you to contact them directly, or if you need their contact information, contact me or Dr. Grubbs. So ultimately, just to wrap it up, I'd just like to say that when I was a graduate student, I suffered from a problem of not giving myself permission to explore these kind of issues. And I think that a lot of times your academic advisor kind of drills that into you of making you think you don't have time or you don't have permission to explore. So I would say ignore those things, those thoughts from your advisor. Explore, talk to other people, do other things outside your discipline to get these skills and to explore what you really want to do.
And just so I don't leave you with a sense of doom, I'll add to that by saying, look, you folks are bright, capable people, right? You would not be here if you were not. Being a grad school is like Navy SEAL training. You endure tons of physical, mental, emotional abuse. You go without food for long periods of time. You live in squalid conditions. You are tough people, right? You can do it, right? You can do it. You have everything within you that you need, right now. There's no...
If you don't get an academic job, the state of Kentucky needs you. And that's the bottom line. I mean, you're educated. You're well educated and you have skills.
Right.
So I'd like to thank the panelists and thank you all for coming, and have a good night.